I'm not sure if this is actually something that is a thing, but if you haven't been on Twitter in the last couple days, you probably don't know about this, but HTMX, our new love for the front end, which is just an attempt to kind of simplify the front end overall, has been under fire a lot recently. And why it's under fire is that what it does is it allows your server to respond with HTML, and then it takes that HTML and puts it directly
Welcome
into,
to Costco.
I forgot to
I
turn
love
off the
you.
alerts. Little Bonaparte, thank you very much. I appreciate that. 2-month sub anniversary on the first day of new job here in Palo Alto. Let's go.
Nice.
That's a beautiful place. Anyways, it allows your server to respond with HTML, and the HTML goes directly into your document. And you kind of specify how you want the replacement strategy to happen. Do you want it to replace the current div, some other div, the parent div, blah, blah, blah. There's like a bunch of different strategies. It can swap out the inside, the outside, however it wants to do it, but it does something. Right? And so that's how it goes. And right now, someone on the internet has pointed out that if you allow users to store data that contain cross-site scripting attacks, and when you respond, you do absolutely no forms of validation, you will get a cross-site scripting attack.
That's factually true. Also, the other one was
Ain't no way.
your server's compromised. Don't forget step 1 of the flow chart, though.
Yeah, I guess step 1 would be that your server has been taken over by hostile hackers. That's true. Are you rendering unsanitized input? Yes, it's so over. No, we're so back. No, but I mean, it is this weird world where when you use something like React or any of these front-end frameworks, they really do keep you on a very special guardrail, right? Like everything, because you aren't actually manipulating the DOM yourself. Like React, you don't even manipulate anything. Instead, it builds an in-memory tree, compares it to a different in-memory tree, and then it determines what changes it needs to make to the DOM. And so the sanitization is always done on the front end in some sense. Whereas when it comes to HTMX, you're producing HTML, which means that there's an expectation of the encoding you need, right? Like you already know how you want to format it, which also means that your server can have a /API, which does respond in JSON if you want JSON, or you can have it as an HTML, or you can just use headers like the old-fashioned way. You use headers to say, hey, and whatever it is, I forget the exact header for content type, whatever you say, whatever you need to do, or accepted content type. I don't know.
/HTML and whatnot.
Yeah, and then there you go. You got it. And now you can actually get HTML back. But your server is the one that's meant to do it. And I'll tell you a little story. At Netflix, we had these things called rich text fields on the television, right? And they would allow for you to add in a bunch of like a little extra stuff, right? But what it also did is by doing that and allowing bold and italicized and all this stuff, it turns out that the users put symbols in which would break the text. And so then we had the front end sanitize it out, and then the back end said, oh, we'll sanitize it out. And so then we had double sanitization. So then it was just like ampersand, semicolon, like trying to do an HTML escape on top of an already escaped item. And it was just a nightmare. And where we ended up landing was just like, let the back end sanitize. We just accept strings as they are. It is always sanitized. It is not our responsibility to do anything but accept what is and display what is. And that is it. And so I always feel like that was the best thing. But what was very surprising is when I said this, people were saying, no, the front end should be the place responsible for sanitization. You, with extensively zero experience doing the web, what do you think, TJ?
What an intro, thanks.
Teej_DV, everybody.
As someone who's an idiot, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Can you provide some insightful, non-insightful feedback here?
Well, my thought is...
Skateboard ramp head.
Well, so I feel like it super depends on like the kind of thing that you're doing, right? So if you are controlling the front end and the back end, like you would for Netflix, right? Where you're basically making the app for Netflix and you're the ones who own the back end. I don't know that there necessarily has to be one right answer, but the back end seems fine because you can also like sanitize it when you save it to your database or do other stuff like that, and then it's just ready to go, right? So then it would just be done. So that seems fine to me. I don't see anything. You would never want to
sanitize pre-database, and the reason being is that imagine if you had a JSON endpoint and an HTML endpoint. How do you encode it? Because there's HTML encoding, There's URI encoding.
Right.
There's
Well, I'm
different
saying for like
encodings.
a user input, right? Like a user types something in of what they're going to put into like a text box or something. I don't
Mhm.
know. It seems fine.
Yeah. And so generally that's kind of my approach, which is your sanitization level depends on your output level. So if you're
Hmm.
outputting HTML, there's a
Yeah.
defined sanitization for HTML.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And so
Yep.
sanitize at the HTML production point, which is
Yep.
why you see these things about HTMX being unsafe, is because inherently people don't understand what React is doing. Therefore, it
Right.
feels unsafe because you don't realize you're React in the HTML world. React
Yeah.
is not React. You are React. You produce the correct
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I guess the other thing too is like if you have multiple clients, it's nice if more of the work happens in the back end, right? Because then that can be shared between your different clients. That seems like a win, right?
Yeah, it is definitely a win.
So
I like it.
that would be my thought.
Well,
That
plus you
seems
get,
good.
yeah, plus you got validation and everything. As long as you're really, you know, it this is such like a weird argument because to me it seems like the only place to do any of this is on the server, just because that's the only place you can fully control. It's
Yeah.
absolutely the controllable point. Whereas
Hmm.
on the client, you can only control to some certain amount. Sure, I mean, if you do it right, then the client can only get reflected, cross-site scripting, meaning that they
Yeah.
disable the HTML or the JavaScripts, and now they've hacked up your website. And now it can, echo out, alert, help me. And so it's just like, is that really a win? Did you really
Yeah.
prove anything? No, not really.
Right.
But I don't know, personal opinion.
It seems fine. It seems fine to me. I mean, I don't really get the complaint that a lot of people had for this because there's very few people I think who are using HTMX that are not using some sort of like backend server framework thing in front of it to generate stuff with it, which makes like automatically sanitizes. Like there's no way to put it in there except with the same kinds of things that you would do with React, like dangerously set inner HTML, right?
Yeah. So here we go. Here's the other. This is the tweet that kind of started it all right here, which is
Yeah.
HTMX is the most dangerous thing to come out in a long time. Here's why.
I need to copy this because this is a really great tweet, even if it's factually not true.
It is. It really is because it sucks people in. There's something called cross-site scripting. It's an attack where someone injects code into your application, which then runs and wrecks the user. Most modern frameworks makes this explicitly hard to do because they don't allow anything to eval HTML or JavaScript. But HTMX doesn't disable this by default like every other framework. Instead, it uses it as a first-class citizen. Here's a video of an XSS trap that would be easy for an unsuspecting dev to fall into.
I'm
They
ready.
go in here, gets chat messages, click me, best chat ever, boom, attacked. So it's able to do this. All it is doing is that it's able to just take data, throw it into an alert, make it happen, boom, right? So this is kind of what we were talking about, which is
Hmm.
you allowed your user to upload data, which was unsanitized,
Yeah.
which is good. I think that that's good. And then when you played the data out, you did not sanitize, and
Right.
therefore you got this. Oh shit! Someone's trying to give it to me right now. Look at this. I don't know what's happening here, but I
They're
think
hacking us right now.
I'm getting hacked right now.
Getting hacked.
Getting hacked, son. Does anyone know a way to prevent it from rendering? So I want to actually go back up to this right here. To me, this is not a bad thing. Instead, let me quote it for you in case you can't see it. Instead, it uses it as a first-class citizen. To me, this is actually the highlight of HTMX, which it
Yeah.
doesn't do anything. It only facilitates making a request and swapping out HTML. So your
Yes.
full responsibility lands in a singular place, the server, which means that if you use React on the server, then this first-class citizen becomes a performance win. This is why you win, right? Right there. You don't even have to
Yeah.
worry about it because then React has already done the sanitization for you, and boom, you just
Yep.
insert it in, and there's no problems.
Yeah. But like for me, so a lot of people seem to hate HTMX because it seems like they're just trying to say JS bad, lol, kek w, JS, like that kind of thing. But they're just missing hypermedia. Like they don't get the point of why this is an interesting like idea for a lot of applications.
Yeah. And I think so we have this thing where I hear it a lot, which is people say, oh yeah, there's some applications that would be good for it. The thing is that you can define a lot of applications that would be good for this approach. In fact, I would say the wide majority of almost every site could benefit from just HTMX.
Yeah, in terms of like just if it's a site or not necessarily like number of users or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Just like, do we
read heavily?
Yes.
Okay, yes, we read heavily. When we write, what are we writing to and how are we writing?
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's like as simple as that. And even then, you can still have WebSockets. And I don't know. And it pairs perfectly with serverless as much as it pairs with run your own server, on-prem stuff, right? Like, there's no dictation anywhere. Whereas, like, React server components, to be able to run it, it's still in this kind of confusing world. And there is only one true implementation of it anyways, which is Next.js. Right. So it's kind of like you're already like, you're like becoming really tight. Whereas with HTMX, it's like, oh, you're an OCaml, Rust, Go, JavaScript. What are you in? Oh, it doesn't matter because we don't care. That's your job and your template backend. That's not our job. We don't care.
Right. Yeah, I think, this kind of thing it just makes it really simple to evolve what you want to do. I mean, the meme of hypermedia as the engine of application state is not actually a meme. I just like it because it sounds fun as well. But this idea of like all of your state is contained in the server. You expose the actions that a user can take by sending the hypermedia controls to the front end. And then all of the state and everything that happens is all in the back end, right? So if someone sends a request to some endpoint and they're not authorized, it doesn't work, right?
Yes.
So it's like, okay, well, I exposed these things. If someone wants to try and send a thing, it's just the same pathway to send the /post with this form data. Well, it never works. There's no like front end state that someone can like flip a bit, and we didn't actually check that in the back end because we thought we were checking in the front end. We only exposed this and this React, all these things, right? It's like, so that part is really cool. And I like that. Like, for me, it's a conceptually simple model to do a lot of these kinds of things. And it also is the model that like Ruby on Rails or LiveView or all these other ones are like already doing, and they're already just sending HTML to the front end. So I don't understand. Am I crazy about? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're 100% correct on pretty much everything you just said. Which
nice,
is like,
pretty good for an idiot.
Pretty good for a dummy. But the big takeaway is that the state, it's better to think of HTMX more like UDP or RTP, where you're trying to create a client server where the server effectively drives the client. So think of like if you could play Game Boy on any device and it just streamed the video to your phone and you could walk around and do all that. Your actions are your controller, right? I'm going to run, jump, slide, start, select, whatever I'm doing. And those just get sent to the server, rendered, and sent back down. HTMX is like identical. You can play an entire game without having to have any state on your client. I mean, Stadia did this, but they did it with like Apex, right? They did it at the tippity top, right? So like, even if you don't go
don't compare HTMX like Stadia.
I know.
No.
Well, I mean, Stadia's obvious problem is that it did
like it was made by Google.
Well, it was made by Google, so they always quit. But they quit. They've abandoned more projects than I have. But
that is an achievement.
That is, I mean, gold star. But the other thing they do is they also they chose to do AAA gaming, which means that you could only have pretty much one computer for one game.
Right.
Which is like, that's not what you want to do. Like, if you're trying to commoditize gaming, you'd probably want to choose something more at like the, like the ARPG level, the kind of the more like, the simpler Switch games. Where
Vampire
you can play, like,
Survivors, Halls of Torment, something like that.
Yeah, and something that's not hyper input sensitive, like like if you're playing Apex and you have 200 milliseconds between when you move your mouse and see it, like,
you'll look like me.
Yeah, just look like you playing video games. It'd be awful. But the other thing I wanted to say, someone in the chat said, well, how does CSS work? You said CSS, blah, 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 blah. The thing about that is that HTMX, again, makes no assumptions about anything. You want Tailwind? Compile Tailwind, send down the CSS, right?
Yeah.
You want to just raw dog CSS? Then do that. Like, there's
you don't even have to compile Tailwind. You can just include the script tag and like load the whole thing. I mean, it's bigger, like it's a bigger bundle, but like if But it's still less than bundling a bunch of JS dependencies too, right? So it's not that big.
Yeah. And so it's kind of both. So you kind of
Yeah.
get this. You just get to choose. That's the answer. HTMX, the simplest way to put it is HTMX is like a super optimized subset of jQuery. jQuery allowed you to just do everything and run via JavaScript. It also had all these Ajax hooks and everything. Now, what happened if you could shrink all the Ajax stuff down, attach it to elements, and say how to use it? That's pretty much what it is. It's just like a shrunk down version of it that's highly specific, and it ends up being actually fairly useful. So yes, CSS, whatever you want. Custom JavaScript, they have custom JavaScript hooks. One thing I don't know is, do they have custom JavaScript hooks? Because actually, this is something I really wanted to bring up to Carson anyways. He's going to be on the show here soon, which was I wanted to see if you could have a custom JavaScript function that returns a promise and the HTML string it produces could be put in. So that way, if you really needed to do something that's more interactive or more different, and you felt like it was only a client-side operation, you could still do it there. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's something you want.
I think you can, because they there's like events that you can handle in JavaScript land for HTMX. So they emit their own events for some of the stuff. So I think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so they do have events, but I was wondering if they have it fully. Okay, so it sounds like they can even do that. So like at that point, you have an escape hatch for full client interactivity, which is like you can do a whole bunch of stuff there if you really needed to. And you know, but it just doesn't seem like
the other thing is it's just like there's an alternate universe where instead of everybody just immediately writing billions of lines of JavaScript, we continue to extend HTML. Like, it's kind of crazy that you can only do get and post from HTML. What's the H stand for in HTML?
Hyper.
You know, and then like, what's the H in HTTP? You know, like, we have these verbs and you can't even send all the verbs from HTML. Right? That doesn't make any sense. Why do I have to resort to JavaScript to make a patch request instead of instead of just being able to do that? Right? That doesn't even make sense. So what if we had just extended HTML to do the things that HTMX is basically trying to do? It doesn't even matter if it's exactly how HTMX does, right? Like, the point would be, what if HTML, just like in the browser, straight up, regular, no loading and additional JavaScript thing, okay, what if you just did that and then the browser managed those things, right? There's no inherent technical reason that HTML could not say, we're not going to do a full page reload when you submit a patch. Instead, we'll take the response and replace it. That's a completely reasonable thing for a browser to do. In fact, that's why we made Spot, you know, like. So, oh man.
DJ, I hope that you know that right now, the front end devs are shook. Okay, they can't handle this.
Shook.
They can't handle this. Okay, just seething right now. You just destroyed millions of lines of JavaScript in a few sentences.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's, I think, HTMX's goal. A lot of those ideas aren't necessarily my own, because I'm an idiot when it comes to the web. It's true. I stole them from reading HTMX's book, which is really good. It's a fun read and interesting to think about.
It is. I'm sorry, but HTMX is unsafe, though. Okay.
It's unsafe. Well, that's why I like it. It makes me feel like I'm living on the edge.
Ooh.
That's what everyone's talking about with edge computing, right?
I mean, I public edging. It's what people want.
That's all I see on Twitter is about edge compute, and like, so yeah, I'm gonna use unsafe technologies to kind of feel like, ooh, I'm an edgy programmer. Nice, guys. Goodness.
Bleeding edge, here I come.
Here I am. Oh, cross-site scripting. Maybe if I make a mistake, my compromised. Oh no.
Users wrecked. Really appreciate this. Hey, thanks for coming on. This was great. Thank you for being a part of this. I know that you're not really experienced with web technologies, kind of dummy, but I really do appreciate the time you took to do this with me. And TJ,
this
I guess
is the hypermedia as the engine of application to static gen.
There you go. Let's go. And this is it. This is your meme you made right afterwards. It's so adorable.
It's a good one.
It's so adorable, and yet at the same time so terrifying due to the unsafety you are promoting.
I'm spreading fake news on Twitter or X.com. Sorry, everybody. I apologize. I'll go think about my crimes.
That's it. Go think about them. All right,
Okay,
the
bye
name
everybody.
is the Primogen.